Commander Hyojin Park stood in the control room of Earth Defense Station Alpha, watching the endless stream of data flowing across her screens. Radio signals, military channels, trade frequencies, entertainment broadcasts, diplomatic communications, all the noise that made Earth what it was to the galaxy. Every day for the past 200 years, human voices had filled the cosmic void with their constant chatter. Today was no different, or so it seemed. Dr. Taemin Lee sat at his console in the Seoul Deep Space Array, monitoring the galaxy's communication networks like he had done every day for 15 years. His job was simple but important: keep Earth connected to the hundreds of human colonies scattered across known space. The massive dishes outside his facility pointed toward distant stars, carrying messages between families, military orders between fleets, and trade negotiations between merchants. The humans were loud, chaotic, and never stopped talking. The aliens had learned to expect this. On the other side of the galaxy, Ambassador Yejin Kim was preparing for another routine meeting with the Galactic Council. She had spent years learning to speak with the different alien species, translating human ideas into forms that other civilizations could understand. The council members often complained about human unpredictability, but they had grown used to it. Humans were the newcomers who brought fresh ideas and endless energy to galactic politics. The Vextar military commanders monitored human space from their distant fortress worlds. These warrior aliens had fought humanity in several small conflicts over the years, always finding human tactics confusing but effective. Human military communications were a constant buzz of activity: fleet movements, supply requests, training exercises. The Vextar had learned to track these signals to predict human actions. Their intelligence officers could read the patterns in human chatter like an old book. The Keth Collective, a peaceful trading civilization, had built their entire economic model around human colonies. Humans bought everything, sold everything, and always needed more resources for their growing populations. Keth merchants could predict market changes by listening to human civilian broadcasts. When humans started talking about new technologies, the Keth knew what to invest in. When humans complained about shortages, the Keth knew what to sell. The ancient Zul Empire barely paid attention to the young human species, but even they had grown accustomed to the background noise of human civilization. Their monitoring stations automatically filtered human signals, treating them like cosmic background radiation. Always there, predictable, ignorable. At exactly 14:32 Galactic Standard Time, everything changed. Commander Hyojin Park was reviewing fleet deployment reports when her communication officer looked up with confusion. "Ma'am, we're getting strange reports from the outer colonies. Multiple facilities are going offline." Before she could respond, her own console lit up with emergency signals. Colony after colony, space station after space station, fleet after fleet again, all reporting the same message: implementing protocol Nightfall, going dark, God help us all. Dr. Taemin Lee watched in horror as his screens went blank one by one. The new Busan colony stopped transmitting mid-sentence during a routine supply request. The Seoul mining operation cut off while reporting their daily production numbers. Military Fleet 7 vanished from communications while conducting a simple patrol mission. In less than 3 minutes, every human facility in his sector had gone completely silent. He ran diagnostics on his equipment, checked for equipment failures, scanned for interference. Nothing. His systems were working perfectly. The humans had simply stopped talking. All of them. Everywhere. At the same time, Ambassador Yejin Kim felt her emergency communicator vibrate. During the council session, the message was brief and terrifying. All human facilities implementing immediate communication blackout. Protocol Nightfall is in effect. You are ordered to maintain diplomatic contact, but reveal nothing about human, military capabilities or intentions. This is not a drill. She had never heard of Protocol Nightfall. In 20 years of diplomatic service, no one had ever mentioned such a procedure. But the authentication codes were genuine, and the message came from the highest levels of human command. The Galactic Council noticed the change within hours. The background chatter of human civilization something they had grown so used to that they barely noticed it anymore, was gone. The communication networks that carried human voices across the galaxy fell silent. Trade frequencies went dead. Military channels stopped broadcasting. Even civilian entertainment signals vanished. The Vextar commanders initially celebrated. "Finally, someone has put the humans in their place," laughed General Krextal as his intelligence officers reported the sudden silence. "Perhaps the Zul have decided to teach them manners, or maybe the humans have finally learned to shut up." But the celebration was short-lived. The Vextar intelligence network depended on human communications to predict their actions. Without the constant flow of human chatter, the Vextar found themselves blind to human movements. Their spies reported that human facilities were still active. Lights were on, ships were moving, people were working, but no one was talking. The Keth merchants panicked. Their entire economy was built on predicting human needs through communication analysis. Without human trade chatter, they had no idea what to buy, sell, or manufacture. Emergency meetings were called across the collective as profit margins collapsed overnight. Even the ancient Zul Empire took notice. Their oldest archives contained warnings about species that went silent before great wars. The elder historians pulled up records from the dawn of galactic civilization, finding references to the quiet death and the silence that precedes annihilation. Dr. Tae-Min Lee worked through the night, trying to understand what had happened. Protocol Nightfall was not in any manual he had access to, but emergency authentication suggested it was a real military directive. He discovered that the protocol had been embedded in human communication systems for decades, waiting for specific trigger conditions. When activated, it would simultaneously shut down all human communications except for the most essential emergency channels. Commander Hyojin Park received her briefing 12 hours after the silence began. The information came through a single, heavily encrypted channel that she had never known existed. Protocol Nightfall was humanity's response to extinction-level threats. When activated, every human facility, ship, and colony would go completely dark to prevent enemy intelligence gathering. All military operations would continue using predetermined plans that required no communication. The briefing revealed something else that made her blood run cold. Protocol Nightfall had been triggered because human deep space monitoring stations had detected something coming. Something that required humanity to prepare for total war while remaining completely hidden from observation. Ambassador Ye-Jin Kim found herself in an impossible position. The Galactic Council demanded answers about the human silence, but her orders were clear: reveal nothing. She could only repeat that humanity remained committed to galactic peace, while providing no information about why every human in the galaxy had suddenly stopped talking. The alien civilizations began to understand that something was terribly wrong. Species across the galaxy shared stories of human behavior patterns. Before every major human conflict, their communications had increased dramatically, except for their most devastating wars. Before those, human populations had gone quiet. The last time a human settlement had stopped communicating completely was New Busan Colony, which had emerged 6 months later, having wiped out an entire invading Krex fleet without taking a single casualty. As the first day of silence ended, long-range sensors began detecting anomalies at the edge of the galaxy. Massive objects were moving in the deep space between galaxies, heading toward the outer rim of inhabited systems. The objects were too large to be natural phenomena and too organized to be random. The galaxy held its breath, waiting for humanity to explain their silence. But the humans said nothing. They continued their work, moved their ships, maintained their colonies, all without saying a single word. And for the first time in galactic history, that silence was more terrifying than any threat they had ever heard. 48 hours had passed since the Great Silence began, and the galaxy was starting to panic. Captain Dongwoo Choi stood on the bridge of his ship Soul's Pride, watching his crew work in perfect coordination without speaking a word. Hand signals, predetermined protocols, and years of training allowed them to function as efficiently as ever. But the silence felt strange even to him. His ship drifted through deep space at the edge of human territory, running on minimal power. with all communication systems shut down. The crew of 200 maintained their posts, following orders that had been programmed into their systems months ago without their knowledge. Everyone knew their role, but no one knew the complete mission except Choi himself, and even he only understood his small part of a much larger plan. Admiral So Young-han commanded the 7th Human Defense Fleet from her flagship, the Incheon's Fury. 50 ships had vanished from all known sensor networks using technology that most humans didn't know existed. Her fleet moved through the darkness between stars like ghosts, following routes that had been calculated years in advance for this exact situation. Each ship maintained perfect formation without any communication, their captains following predetermined navigation protocols that seemed random to outside observers but followed a precise mathematical pattern. Han had been preparing for this moment her entire career, though she had never expected it to actually happen. Protocol Nightfall was a theoretical response to threats that military planners hoped would never materialize. Now that it was active, she felt the weight of human survival resting on her shoulders. Her fleet was humanity's first line of defense against whatever was coming from beyond the galaxy's edge. Dr. Jin Ho Kang worked alone in his research station orbiting a dead planet in the outer rim. 3 weeks earlier, his team had discovered something that changed everything they thought they knew about galactic history. The crystalline artifact they found buried beneath the planet's surface looked beautiful and harmless, but when they activated it, it revealed a terrifying truth about the galaxy's past. The station's automated systems continued their analysis of the artifact, while Kang prepared for what was coming. His last transmission before the silence had been a desperate warning to Earth Defense Command. The trigger event has occurred. They know we're here. God help us all. Since then, he had worked frantically to understand the alien technology, knowing that human survival might depend on what he could learn from it. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session for the 3rd time in 2 days. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered to discuss the human silence and its implications for galactic security. The Vextar demanded immediate military action against human space, convinced that the silence meant humans were preparing for war against the galaxy itself. They have gone quiet because they plan to attack us all, declared General Krextal, his armor gleaming under the council chamber lights. This is the behavior of a species preparing for genocide. We must strike first before they can complete their preparations. The Keth representative disagreed strongly. The humans are our partners in trade and development. Their silence must be a response to some external threat. We should offer assistance, not violence. Ambassador Ye-Jin Kim sat in the Human Observer section, listening to the debate while saying nothing. Her orders were clear. Maintain diplomatic relations but reveal no information about human activities or intentions. She could only watch as fear and suspicion spread through the council like a plague. Ancient databases were consulted across the galaxy, as historians and military analysts tried to understand what human silence meant. The Vextar Military Academy had studied human conflicts for decades, mapping the patterns of human communication before their wars. The data revealed a disturbing trend. Before small conflicts, human chatter increased dramatically. But before their most devastating campaigns, entire populations had gone silent for weeks or months. The massacre at Kepler Station had been preceded by 3 weeks of complete silence from all human military units in the sector. When the fighting began, human forces had appeared from nowhere and destroyed a pirate fleet 3 times their size without suffering a single casualty. The Battle of Proxima Centauri had followed the same pattern, complete silence followed by overwhelming victory against impossible odds. The Keth Collective's economic analysts presented their own findings to the Council. Human-civilian communications had revealed patterns that suggested massive industrial mobilization in the months before the silence. Raw material purchases had increased by 400%. Manufacturing output had shifted toward military applications, and population movements suggested widespread evacuation preparations. The humans have been preparing for this for months, possibly years, reported Chief Analyst Kethva. Their silence is not sudden panic. It is the final phase of a carefully planned response to some anticipated threat. The Zul Empire emerged from their self-imposed isolation for the first time in centuries. Elder historian Zulmak addressed the council with information that chilled every representative present. The ancient archives contained references to species that had gone silent before great catastrophes, not because they were causing them, but because they were preparing to fight them. In the early days of our civilization, we encountered species that possessed what you would call extinction protocols, Zulmak explained. When faced with threats that could destroy all life in the galaxy, these species would cease all communication and prepare for what they called silent war. The last species to employ such tactics saved 17 civilizations from destruction before disappearing into the void. Long-range sensors detected the first concrete evidence of what was approaching. Massive structures were moving through the space between galaxies, following trajectories that would bring them to the outer rim of inhabited space within weeks. The objects were artificial, too geometric to be natural phenomena, too large to be normal spacecraft. Each structure measured hundreds of kilometers in length and showed energy signatures unlike anything in galactic databases. Dr. Kang's research station automatically transmitted its findings to hidden receivers throughout human space. The artifact he had discovered was not unique. Identical structures had been found on dozens of dead worlds throughout the galaxy's outer rim. Every planet that hosted one of these artifacts showed signs of having once supported advanced civilizations that had been completely annihilated. The artifacts were beacon devices designed to scan for species with sufficient technological advancement to serve as processing nodes for something called the Harvest Protocol. When activated by technological civilizations, the beacons would transmit coordinates and capability assessments to entities waiting in the dark spaces between galaxies. Captain Choi received new orders through a coded light signal from a passing asteroid that looked natural, but wasn't. His ship and dozens of others began moving toward predetermined positions throughout the galaxy, following routes that avoided all known sensor networks. Each ship carried modified weapon systems and defensive technologies that had been developed. In secret over the past decade, Admiral Han's fleet reached its assigned position in the deep space between star systems. Her ships powered down to minimal energy signatures, becoming invisible to conventional sensors, while maintaining readiness for immediate combat operations. Similar fleets were taking positions throughout the galaxy, creating a network of hidden defenders that no alien civilization knew existed. The Galactic Defense Force attempted to coordinate a response to the approaching threat, but their communication networks were too easily monitored and their command structures too rigid for the kind of warfare that was coming. Species that had never worked together tried to form alliances, but old prejudices and competing interests made cooperation difficult. Commander Park supervised the conversion of civilian manufacturing facilities to military production. Factories that had been making consumer goods were now producing ammunition and ship components. The transformation had begun months before the silence, hidden behind false production reports and misdirected supply shipments. Now that Protocol Nightfall was active, the conversion accelerated to maximum efficiency. Human colonies throughout the galaxy implemented identical procedures without any communication between them. Each facility followed predetermined protocols that had been embedded in their systems for years, waiting for the specific trigger conditions that would activate them. The result was perfect coordination across hundreds of light years without a single transmitted message. As the second day of silence ended, the approaching structures became visible to optical telescopes. They were ships, but unlike anything ever seen before. Living metal flowed across their surfaces like water, constantly reshaping itself for unknown purposes. Energy patterns suggested technology that could manipulate matter at the atomic level. Most disturbing of all, the ships were heading directly for the most populated systems in the galaxy. The aliens finally understood what human silence meant. It wasn't preparation for war against the galaxy. It was preparation for war to save the galaxy. The humans had detected a threat that could destroy every living thing in known space. Chief Strategist Wu Jin-yoon sat in the deepest bunker beneath Seoul, surrounded by screens displaying information that would terrify any sane person. The crystalline artifacts discovered on dead worlds throughout the galaxy were not random debris from ancient civilizations. They were scout beacons left by something that called itself the Devourers. For millions of years, these entities had moved from galaxy to galaxy, consuming every trace of intelligent life they encountered. The artifacts scanned technological civilizations to determine their usefulness as processing nodes for the next phase of galactic consumption. Species that showed sufficient advancement would be enslaved and used to help harvest their neighbors. Those that proved inadequate would be eliminated immediately. The beacons transmitted detailed capability assessments to the Devourer fleet waiting in dark space, providing complete intelligence about every species in the target galaxy. Engineer Yuri Nam worked frantically in the hidden research facility, beneath the Busan shipyards, putting final touches on technology that would determine humanity's survival. For 5 years, human scientists had been developing what they called ghost fleet systems, modifications that allowed ships to operate completely undetected by any known sensor technology. The project had been classified beyond top secret, known only to a handful of researchers and military commanders. The ghost fleet technology worked by manipulating quantum signatures at the molecular level, making human ships invisible to the quantum entanglement networks that advanced civilizations used for detection and communication. Ships equipped with the technology could move freely through space without leaving any trace of their existence, becoming perfect tools for asymmetric warfare against technologically superior enemies. Biologist Kyung-Soo Park had made the most important discovery of all in his laboratory orbiting Jupiter. The Devourers tracked their prey through quantum entanglement signatures created by advanced communication networks. Every message transmitted between star systems created detectable patterns that the invaders could follow like breadcrumbs leading back to their source. Civilizations that relied heavily on galactic communication were the easiest targets because they constantly advertised their locations and capabilities. His solution was as brilliant as it was terrifying. Humanity could only defeat the Devourers by fighting a completely silent war. No communication between ships, no coordination between fleets, no contact between colonies. Every human unit would have to operate independently, following predetermined protocols without any way to adapt to changing circumstances or call for help. The Devourer fleet had arrived at the galaxy's edge and begun their systematic advance toward the core systems. Long-range observations revealed the true horror of what humanity faced. The invading ships were not mechanical constructs, but living entities the size of small moons. Their hulls rippled with organic material that could reshape itself instantly for any purpose. Weapons, shields, manufacturing facilities, or habitat areas. Each Devourer ship contained billions of enslaved beings from previously conquered galaxies. Their minds linked into a collective intelligence that served their captors without question. The fleet moved with perfect coordination, demonstrating tactical capabilities that surpassed anything known to galactic military science. Most disturbing of all, they showed complete knowledge of every species' technology and weaknesses, information provided by the scout beacons over decades of observation. The first contact came when the Devourer fleet reached the Outer Rim territories. The Keth mining colonies tried to negotiate, broadcasting messages of peaceful intent and offers of cooperation. The response was immediate and devastating. Conversion beams that transformed the Keth populations into willing slaves in less than an hour. The converted Keth began transmitting detailed information about galactic defensive capabilities and population centers to their new masters. Commander Park received intelligence reports through the hidden networks that human military had spent years establishing. The reports painted a picture of systematic conquest that followed the same pattern the Devourers had used in dozens of other galaxies. First contact was always followed by rapid enslavement of cooperative species and elimination of those that resisted. The enslaved populations then served as scouts and soldiers for the next phase of expansion. The Vextar military launched a massive coordinated assault against the nearest Devourer ships, confident that superior firepower and aggressive tactics would prevail. 500 warships attacked in perfect formation, executing battle plans that had proven effective against every known enemy. The Devourers responded by predicting every move the Vextar would make, countering their strategies before they could be implemented. The battle lasted less than 6 hours. The Devourer ships absorbed the Vextar weapons fire and converted the energy into fuel for their own systems. Vextar communications were intercepted and used to coordinate devastating counterattacks that destroyed entire squadrons. By the end of the engagement, 400 Vextar ships had been destroyed and the remaining 100 had been captured along with their crews. The surviving Vextar became willing servants of their captors within minutes of capture, their minds rewritten to serve Devourer objectives. They immediately began broadcasting detailed intelligence about Vexitar military installations, defensive strategies, and alliance agreements with other species. The information allowed the Devourers to plan their next attacks with complete knowledge of what resistance they would face. The Keth Collective attempted a different approach, sending diplomatic envoys to establish peaceful contact with the invaders. The Keth believed that rational negotiation could resolve any conflict, and they had centuries of experience in successful diplomacy with hostile species. Their envoys carried offers of trade agreements, cultural exchange, and mutual cooperation. The Devourer response was to convert the entire Keth diplomatic fleet in front of watching galactic observers. The enslaved Keth returned to their home, systems carrying instructions for immediate surrender and detailed intelligence about collective defenses. When the collective leadership refused to comply, their own diplomatic corps turned their ships' weapons against their homeworlds. Dr. Kang continued his analysis of the beacon artifacts from his isolated research station, trying to understand exactly how the Devourer technology worked. His discoveries revealed that the invaders used quantum entanglement on a galactic scale, linking every enslaved mind into a collective intelligence that spanned multiple star systems. The network allowed instant communication and coordination across vast distances, giving the Devourers perfect battlefield awareness. The quantum network also explained how the Devourers could predict enemy actions with such accuracy. Every time a galactic species used their communication networks, they provided intelligence about their intentions, capabilities, and strategic plans. The more a civilization relied on coordinated tactics and real-time communication, the more vulnerable they became to Devourer countermeasures. Admiral Han received confirmation that her fleet was in position and ready for the first human strike against the invaders. The 7th Fleet had been modified with the most advanced Ghost Fleet technology available, making them invisible to both conventional sensors and quantum detection networks. Each ship carried weapons specifically designed to disrupt the quantum entanglement fields that held the Devourer collective together. Her orders were simple but unprecedented in galactic warfare: conduct independent operations against Devourer targets without any communication or coordination with other human forces. Each captain would follow predetermined protocols based on anticipated enemy behavior, adapting to circumstances using their own judgment. Success would depend entirely on individual initiative and the quality of their pre-war planning. Captain Choi prepared his crew for their assigned mission, infiltrating Devourer-controlled space to gather intelligence about enemy capabilities and weaknesses. Soul's Pride had been equipped with the most advanced stealth systems ever developed, allowing them to observe Devourer operations without being detected. The information they gathered would be transmitted to other human forces through coded signals that appeared to be natural cosmic phenomena. The Zul Empire attempted to hide their civilization by shutting down all external communications and retreating to their most remote colonies. The ancient species had survived previous galactic catastrophes by avoiding contact with hostile forces until the danger passed. Their strategy had worked for millions of years against conventional enemies, but the Devourers had different capabilities. The scout beacons had already mapped every Zul installation over decades of passive observation. When the Devourer fleet reached Zul space, they proceeded directly to every hidden colony and research station. The Zul found themselves under attack by an enemy that knew their locations, defenses, and evacuation procedures better than they did themselves. Ambassador Kim watched in horror as the Galactic Council dissolved into chaos. Species representatives accused each other of secretly cooperating with the invaders. Alliance agreements collapsed under mutual suspicion, and military coordination became impossible as no one trusted their communications networks. Admiral So Young-han's flagship materialized from the darkness like a ghost, its ghost fleet systems allowing it to approach the massive Devourer harvester ship completely undetected. The enemy vessel stretched for hundreds of kilometers, its living hull pulsing with organic light as it processed the remains of the Keth civilization. Millions of enslaved beings worked within its depths, their minds linked to the collective intelligence that controlled every aspect of Devourer operations. Han studied the enemy through sensors that the Devourers couldn't detect, watching as conversion beams transformed captured Keth into willing slaves. The process was horrifyingly efficient. Within minutes, proud warriors and brilliant scientists became docile servants who immediately began providing intelligence about their former allies and defensive installations. Her fleet of 50 ships held position in perfect silence, each captain understanding their role without needing communication. They had trained for this moment for years, running simulation exercises that prepared them for independent operations against technologically superior enemies. Now those exercises would determine whether humanity could strike back against an enemy that seemed invincible. The attack began without warning or coordination. Each human ship targeted a different section of the Devourer vessel, firing weapons specifically designed to disrupt quantum entanglement fields. The enemy's collective intelligence suddenly found itself partially blinded as portions of its network went offline. For the first time since entering the galaxy, a Devourer ship was taking damage it couldn't immediately repair or counter. The Harvester ship tried to respond with its standard tactics, predicting enemy movements through communication interception and adjusting defenses accordingly. But the human ships weren't communicating with each other or following any detectable pattern. Each captain made independent decisions based on real-time battlefield conditions, creating a chaotic assault that the collective intelligence couldn't predict or counter. Captain Dongwu Choi watched the battle from his position deeper in Devourer-controlled space where Soul's Pride continued gathering intelligence on enemy operations. His ship remained invisible to Devourer sensors, allowing him to observe how the invaders responded to human attacks. What he saw gave him hope for the first time since the invasion began. The Devourer collective was struggling to adapt to an enemy that didn't follow predictable patterns. Their tactical superiority depended on perfect information about enemy intentions and capabilities, information they gathered through quantum entanglement networks and communication intercepts. Human silent warfare denied them both advantages, forcing them to fight blind against an opponent they couldn't understand. Choi transmitted his observations to other human forces through coded signals embedded in what appeared to be natural stellar phenomena. The intelligence reached ghost ships throughout the galaxy, confirming that human tactics were effective against the seemingly invincible invaders. More importantly, it revealed specific weaknesses in Devourer technology that could be exploited by future attacks. The first human victory sent shockwaves through both the Devourer collective and the remaining free civilizations. The massive Harvester ship had been completely destroyed, its enslaved populations freed when the quantum control network was severed. For the first time since the invasion began, a Devourer vessel had been eliminated without any survivors to report human capabilities to the enemy fleet. Free alien civilizations monitoring the battle couldn't understand what they had witnessed. The human attack had appeared completely random and uncoordinated, with ships arriving from different directions at different times and targeting seemingly arbitrary points on the enemy vessel. Yet the result had been devastatingly effective, suggesting tactical coordination that surpassed anything in galactic military science. The Vextar survivors, those few ships that had escaped enslavement during their disastrous first encounter, began to understand that humanity had developed entirely new approaches to warfare. General Krextal, commanding the last free Vextar forces from a hidden base in the Outer Rim, studied sensor records of the human attack with growing amazement. They fight without talking to each other, he told his officers. Every ship operates independently, making decisions that support the overall assault without knowing what the other ships are doing. It should be impossible, but somehow they achieve perfect coordination through individual initiative. The Devourer fleet responded to the loss of the Harvester by accelerating their advance toward the galactic core. Hundreds of massive ships began systematic attacks on every major civilization, seeking to complete their conquest before the mysterious human tactics could spread to other species. Their enslaved armies provided detailed intelligence about defensive installations and military capabilities, allowing the invaders to plan attacks with overwhelming superiority. Commander Park coordinated humanity's response from the hidden command, bunker beneath Sol, using communication methods so subtle that they appeared to be natural phenomena to outside observers. Encoded signals in stellar radiation patterns, quantum fluctuations in cosmic background radiation, and gravitational wave modulations carried orders to human forces throughout the galaxy without creating detectable transmissions. The orders were simple: continue independent operations against devourer targets while avoiding contact with allied alien forces. Any communication with non-human civilizations risked exposing human capabilities to the enemy collective through their enslaved agents. Humanity would fight alone, trusting that their silent tactics would succeed where conventional warfare had failed. Dr. Sira Lim worked frantically in her laboratory deep within the moon's core, developing what she hoped would be humanity's ultimate weapon against the Devourer collective. Her quantum severance device could theoretically disrupt the entanglement fields that linked enslaved minds to their captors, potentially freeing entire civilizations from Devourer control with a single activation. The technology was based on principles discovered through analysis of the beacon artifacts, using the enemy's own quantum manipulation techniques against them. If successful, the weapon could simultaneously free millions of enslaved beings throughout the galaxy, while disrupting the collective intelligence that coordinated Devourer operations. Testing the weapon required extreme caution. Any detectable quantum disturbance might alert the enemy to humanity's capabilities. Lim conducted her experiments using isolated test chambers that existed outside normal space-time, preventing any leakage of quantum signatures that enemy sensors might detect. The results were promising but incomplete. She needed more time to perfect the technology. Admiral Han's fleet struck again, this time targeting a Devourer command ship that was coordinating attacks on the Keth homeworlds. The enemy vessel was heavily defended by enslaved Keth ships under collective control, creating a tactical challenge that conventional forces couldn't overcome. Human ghost ships penetrated the defensive perimeter without being detected, appearing among the enslaved fleet like phantoms. The battle that followed demonstrated the true horror of Devourer warfare. Enslaved Keth crews fought desperately against their former allies, their minds rewritten to serve their captors with fanatical devotion. Human captains found themselves destroying ships crewed by innocent victims who had no choice in their actions. The psychological toll was devastating, but the tactical necessity was clear. The Devourer command ship fell after a 6-hour battle, its destruction freeing hundreds of enslaved Keth vessels and their crews. The liberated aliens found themselves suddenly free from collective control, confused and traumatized but grateful to be themselves again. Many immediately began broadcasting warnings to their fellow Keth about Devourer capabilities and tactics. Captain Choi's intelligence gathering revealed disturbing information about the true scope of the invasion. The Devourer fleet in the galaxy was only a small fraction of their total forces. The vast majority remained in dark space between galaxies, waiting for the advance forces to complete their conquest. Even if humanity succeeded in defeating the current invasion, larger forces would eventually arrive to finish what the scouts had started. The revelation forced human strategists to reconsider their objectives. Simply defeating the current Devourer fleet wouldn't ensure long-term survival. They needed to find a way to prevent future invasions or discourage the enemy from returning. The solution would require understanding Devourer psychology and motivations, information that could only be gained through continued observation and analysis. Free alien civilizations began reporting strange phenomena in their territories. Devourer ships under attack by invisible enemies, enslaved populations suddenly freed from collective control, and enemy commanders displaying confusion and uncertainty for the first time since the invasion began. The mysterious attacks always followed the same pattern. No detectable approach, devastating precision strikes, and complete disappearance without any trace. Ambassador Kim watched the Galactic Council struggle to understand what was happening in their territories. Some representatives suspected that humanity had developed new weapons and tactics, but without communication from human forces. General Moon-ho Kim stood in the war room deep beneath the Himalayas, watching the final pieces of humanity's greatest gambit fall into place. For 127 days, every human in the galaxy had maintained perfect silence while fighting a war that would determine the survival of all intelligent life. Now the time had come for the ultimate test of human strategic planning and individual courage. Dr. Sira Lim's quantum severance weapon was finally ready for deployment. The device existed in multiple copies hidden throughout the galaxy, each one positioned by ghost ships that had penetrated deep into Devourer-controlled territory without being detected. When activated simultaneously, the weapons would sever every quantum entanglement connection the Devourers used to control their enslaved armies. Admiral Eun-ji Lee commanded the largest ghost fleet humanity had ever assembled, 300 ships, that had converged on the galactic core where the main Devourer force was preparing for their final assault on the remaining free worlds. Her fleet remained invisible to enemy sensors, positioned in the deep space around the ancient supermassive black hole that anchored the galaxy's center. Strategist Woo Jin-yoon had spent months calculating the precise timing needed for humanity's ultimate strategy. Every human unit in the galaxy would need to act simultaneously without any communication or coordination, following predetermined protocols that had been established before the silence began. The margin for error was zero. Any mistake would doom not just humanity but every free civilization in the galaxy. The Devourer Collective had grown increasingly frustrated with human tactics over the past 4 months. Their enslaved armies provided detailed intelligence about every known species except the humans, who remained completely invisible to their surveillance networks. Ghost attacks had destroyed dozens of major Devourer vessels while freeing millions of enslaved beings from collective control. The invaders had responded by accelerating their conquest schedule, seeking to eliminate all organized resistance before human tactics could spread to other species. Their massive fleet had reached the galactic core, where they began constructing harvest facilities that would process the populations of entire star systems. The scale of the operation was beyond anything previously seen. Billions of beings would be enslaved or eliminated within days. Captain Dongwoo Choi positioned Seoul's Pride at the edge of the main Devourer fleet, using his ship's advanced sensors to monitor enemy preparations for the final assault. What he observed confirmed humanity's worst fears about their enemies' capabilities. The Devourers weren't just conquering the galaxy, they were preparing to transform it into a massive processing facility for harvesting other galaxies. The enemy fleet included construction vessels that could reshape entire planets into slave factories, weapons platforms capable of sterilizing star systems, and command ships that coordinated the activities of trillions of enslaved beings. Most disturbing of all were the portal generators that could create stable wormholes to other galaxies, allowing the Devourers to spread their conquest beyond the known universe. Ambassador Yejin Kim received the final transmission from Human Command through the encrypted emergency channel that had maintained contact throughout the silent period. The message was brief but carried the weight of species survival. Protocol Daybreak authorized. Execute on my mark. For humanity, for the galaxy, for the future of all free peoples. She understood what the message meant. The silent war was about to end one way or another. Either humanity's ultimate strategy would succeed in driving off the Devourers, or both species would be destroyed in the attempt. There would be no second chances, no opportunity to retreat and try again. This was humanity's final gambit against an enemy that had conquered dozens of other galaxies. The first phase began exactly at galactic midnight, calculated to maximize the element of surprise across all time zones. Dr. Lim's quantum severance weapons activated simultaneously at 1,000 locations throughout Devourer-controlled territory. The effect was immediate and devastating to the enemy collective. Millions of enslaved minds suddenly found themselves free from alien control for the first time in months. Freed Vextar crews immediately turned their weapons against their former captors, attacking Devourer vessels from within their own defensive perimeters. Liberated Keth engineers sabotaged the harvest facilities they had been forced to build, causing massive explosions that destroyed months of construction work. Enslaved Keth warriors broke free from collective control and began fighting their way toward escape pods and shuttle bays. The chaos spread throughout the Devourer fleet as the collective intelligence found itself partially blinded by the loss of millions of linked minds. Command ships that had coordinated flawlessly for months suddenly began issuing contradictory orders as their quantum networks failed. The perfect unity that had made the Devourers invincible was fracturing under the assault on their control systems. Admiral Han's ghost fleet struck in the confusion, appearing throughout Devourer space like avenging spirits. Ships that had remained hidden for months suddenly revealed themselves, targeting critical enemy installations with weapons, specifically designed to exploit the vulnerabilities that human intelligence had discovered. Command vessels, portal generators, and harvest platforms became priority targets for coordinated strikes that the enemy couldn't predict or counter. The battle that followed was unlike anything in galactic history, a three-dimensional conflict, spanning thousands of cubic light years, with human ghost ships appearing and disappearing like phantoms, while freed slave populations fought desperate battles against their former captors. The Devourer collective struggled to adapt to an enemy that fought without pattern or predictable coordination. Admiral Lee led the assault on the main Devourer command complex, a living structure the size of a small planet that served as the central nervous system for the entire invasion force. Her fleet had to penetrate defensive layers that included converted planets, massive weapons platforms, and millions of smaller vessels still under collective control. The approach required perfect timing and individual initiative from every human captain. Ships had to navigate through defensive zones without communication, each vessel following predetermined routes while adapting to real-time battlefield conditions. The slightest miscalculation would result in detection and immediate destruction by overwhelming enemy forces. Captain Choi's intelligence proved crucial during the final assault. His months of observation had revealed the exact location of the collective's central processing cores within the command complex. The information had been transmitted to assault teams through coded gravitational wave pulses that appeared to be natural stellar phenomena, allowing human forces to target the most critical enemy systems. The battle for the command complex lasted 18 hours, with human ghost ships fighting their way through layer after layer of desperate defensive positions. Freed slave populations provided crucial assistance, their knowledge of enemy installations and procedures allowing human forces to strike at vulnerable points that wouldn't have been obvious to outside observers. Dr. Lim activated the final phase of her quantum severance system as human forces breached the command complex's outer defenses. The most powerful weapons in her arsenal simultaneously targeted the core quantum processors that maintained the collective intelligence across galactic distances. The effect was like performing surgery on a living brain while it remained conscious and fighting back. The Devourer collective consciousness began fragmenting as critical processing nodes went offline. Individual ships and installations found themselves cut off from central command, forced to operate independently for the first time in their existence. The perfect coordination that had made them invincible became a liability as isolated units struggled to function without constant guidance from the collective mind. Commander Park initiated humanity's final gambit from the command bunker beneath Sol. Hidden weapons systems throughout human space simultaneously targeted the portal, generators that allowed Devourers to travel between galaxies. If the portals could be destroyed, the main invasion force would be trapped in the current galaxy, unable to retreat or summon reinforcements from their home territories. The attack succeeded beyond human expectations. Portal after portal collapsed, as human weapons disrupted the exotic matter containment systems that kept the wormholes stable. Massive explosions rippled through space-time as the artificial wormholes collapsed, severing the Devourer fleet's connection to their home galaxy and the vast reserves of ships and troops waiting in dark space. Realizing they were trapped and facing an enemy they couldn't understand or defeat, the surviving Devourer forces attempted a desperate retreat to the galaxy's edge. But human ghost fleets had anticipated this possibility, positioning themselves along every possible escape route. The hunter had become the hunted as invisible human ships stalked the retreating invaders through the darkness between stars. Admiral Han led the pursuit fleet that followed the main Devourer force to the galaxy's edge, ensuring that none of the invaders escaped to threaten other galaxies in the future. The final battle took place in the void between galactic arms,